Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to an opinionated edition of OLC4O. So that's right. Today we'll be talking about opinions, expressing your opinion, recognizing the opinions of others, and all that great stuff. So thank you for joining us for an opinionated session of OLC4O Term 2B, brought to you by WASA Distance Education Center. I am your instructor, Mike Laverty, and today's date is Thursday, May 11th, 2023. Today's date marks class number 16 of OLC4O. We are working our way through Unit 2, and today we'll talk about assignments 25 and 26. And if we have enough time at the end, I wouldn't mind jumping back to yesterday's class where we had planned out an information paragraph. So if we have time, maybe I'll flash back to assignment 24. But for now, we'll focus on assignments 25 and 26. So here are some important dates to keep in mind. This is week 4 of term 2B. It's a 9-week term, and that's the last one in this school year, so really important to keep that in mind. So it's a 9-week term. For all you potential grads out there, you have a deadline for submitting work of June the 9th. So you need to have your coursework submitted to me. If OLC4O is your last course, or another course you're taking is your final course, or you've got 2 more to go, you have to have all that coursework submitted by June the 9th. All other students have a deadline of June 16th for submitting work in this course, okay? So you've got till June 16th. After that date, you would need to register for the summer and start your course over again, okay? So I can't emphasize that enough. So I want to clarify this, because I was telling this to students on the air, and I want to make sure that I had the details right, because I think the way I was phrasing it before was suggesting that you could just register for the summer term and then continue your coursework from there. So I apologize if there's any miscommunication, but this is the correct information, okay? So you have to have your coursework in by June 16th. So you've got, about a month and a week, so about 6 weeks to get it all done. Otherwise, you would have to start it all over again. So I don't want you to do that. All right, so we covered Unit 1 in weeks 1, 2, and 3, and now we are on to Unit number 2. And we will use all of week 4 and then all of week 5 to discuss Unit 2 of this course. OLC broadcasts live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 1 p.m. to 1:50 p.m. I usually go a bit over. You can always phone to the studio at 1-800-465-7144. Phone in with your questions or comments. We are on the airways live at 91.9 FM in Sioux Lookout and many other stations in the far north. You can listen to us on Bell ExpressVu, channel 972. Or you can go to Zoom. Go to zoom.us on your phone, your PC, your tablet. Click Join Meeting, and then enter my meeting ID, 417-6699-799. And of course, I upload all my videos to YouTube, so check me out on YouTube. Look for Laverty WASA. Go to the OLC4O playlist. I did teach this course in Term 1B, so you'll see those courses there as well. Reach out to me directly through email, mlaverty@nnecschools.org. Find me on Facebook, Laverty space WASA, Laverty space WASA, and you can connect with me on Facebook. Or phone the WASA office, toll free, 1-800-667-3703. You want to do that to get in touch with the staff here at WASA if you've got questions about those deadlines that I brought up. So I'm going to talk about that every class. Every class I'm going to bring up those deadlines and encourage students to start submitting work in now. So along that lines, here's your suggested progress. So you should have reached out to your teacher by now. That's myself, through email, phone, or messenger. You should pretty much have completed all the assignments in Unit 1. So Unit 1 should be pretty much done. This is after you've been taking the course for about 3.5 weeks. Unit 1 has the most assignments. It has the most work in it. You should have read or skimmed the Unit 2 handout and read the first chapters of our novel, Jimmy Comes Home. So chapters, 1 to 3, or beyond, if you're really on the ball. All right, so let's go into today's lesson. So we'll look at our words of the day, look at a headline, and then we'll delve into assignment 25 and 26. And then if we got time, we'll flash back and look at assignment 24. Your learning goals are to take notes as we review assignment 25, and then review the writing process as it relates to writing an opinion article. So that's going to be the focus here. We're going to be talking about opinion articles, how they're written, and how somebody expresses an opinion, how they develop that opinion through an article. Your success criteria will be to complete assignment 25 by reviewing your notes, the notes that you take as you watch this or listen to me talk, and to practice the writing process to help you plan out assignment 26. So I'm not going to be going into full detail. The class on Monday will also dive into assignment 26. It's a big one, so I suggest watching both those classes to get a full understanding of how to write your opinion your opinion. It's a series of paragraphs that expresses an opinion. So this is the longest writing assignment you do, and that's why it takes me a couple classes to go through it. All right, so on to our words of the day. And so up on the screen, I've got I have an editorial cartoon, and this is an editorial cartoon about editorial cartoons. And it says, an editorial or a political cartoon, they try to grind down a news story into a single image. It's harder than it looks. So much news, can't keep up. All the news is grinding into his head, and he's trying to get it out there. Unlike fact-based reporting, a cartoon is opinion, not news. So that's different, right? So a news report should just be talking about things that happen objectively. So when something's objective, it's the fact, it's just simply what happened. And then when things are subjective, someone's giving their opinion on it, right? So any news story could be fodder or material for a cartoon. Sometimes they make you laugh, sometimes they make you angry, but at least they'll get you talking. And that's the point of an opinion piece, right? You're trying to get a discussion going and try to persuade someone that your opinion is the right one. They may or may not agree with you, but you do your best to put your best case forward. So here's our Anishinaabe-Moan word of the day. Ishkwatawin is a certain way of belief, a religion, a culture. So Ijitawawin. So I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Again, I always like to stress that I do my best to pronounce things correctly, but sometimes I know I'm not 100%. English word of the day is opinion, a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. So not necessarily, right? So your opinion can be based on fact or knowledge, and when you write your opinion article, I'm hoping that you do base your opinion on fact or knowledge. But someone's opinion can just be simply their judgment. It's their belief about something. Doesn't have to be right, doesn't have to be true, it's their opinion. Here's a couple of examples of political cartoons. These are about Trump and Joe Biden. In the top one, it says, I'm getting a second opinion from my gut. That's Donald Trump. The one on the bottom is Trump being... he's victorious in the boxing ring, and an elephant is holding up his arm, and the elephant represents the Republican Party in the American system. So the fact that this elephant is so beat up and bruised, but he's still happy, is giving the argument. And the opinion here is that Trump won the election bid, but it's really bad for the party. And same thing goes for the first one. Trump gets all his opinions from himself, not from the experts. And then we've got a Joe Biden cartoon. He says, "You're strong as heck," and he's got a guy lifting up weights, and the weights are labeled inflation, and the guy is the economy. So a lot of times these political cartoons, they try to condense a lot of things, so they have to like give labels to things. So in this case, he's trying to help the economy, but you know, inflation is choking out the economy. And then he's got his eyes closed, and he's just saying everything's great. I'm decreasing your debt and increasing theirs. So this was when Joe Biden decreased student loan debts in America, and a lot of people were upset about that. And he said, look, I'm just going to take this debt and then just throw it over here and, you know, crush somebody else with it, in this case, the taxpayers. So people are giving an opinion in a very kind of like shortened version. Here's some more Anishinaabe-Moan words. We've got Gweakotam. It's a verb. She or he hears the right thing. She finds out the truth. Debwe, which is, you know, Debwewen is the truth, and Debwe is she or he tells the truth, speaks the truth. Some related words in English. We have an assumption. So an assumption is something taken for granted, right? It doesn't have to be checked on. You just assume it's there. It may or may not be there. An impression is a notion, a remembrance, a belief, often of a vague or indistinct nature. So when things are vague and they're indistinct, we can't really pin them down. It's just an impression I have. It's not really based on fact. And then speculation, the contemplation or consideration of some subject, right? So just thinking about it, right? So in English, we have theories, right? So theories is a coherent group of tested general propositions. So we can have theories about things, and our theories can be informed by fact and experimentation and things like that, but they are still theories. And yeah, so it just the main takeaway here is that, you know, it's a complicated task to sort of to give your opinion on something, and to give your theory about something, and to, you know, and to speculate on things, right? And, you know, anybody can just offer an opinion, but the opinions that are going to get attention and the opinions that are going to get people talking and make change in the real world, which is a lot of times is probably the best thing you can ever hope for with your writing, is that, you know, you want your opinion to change people's minds and to inspire them to do different things. Which brought me to this funny e-card. It says the difference. Note that difference is spelled wrong. The difference between a fact and an opinion is what you think. A fact is what I think. So that's a joke, right? But that's kind of how a lot of people tend to think, right? When they we like to think that our opinions are based on facts, and they're right, and they're true, and they're accurate. And if someone doesn't, if we disagree with someone, then they're just making stuff up, and they're not being based in reality. But you know, it's very hard to see our own limitations. But if we take a good hard look at our own beliefs, and we really drill down to what we want to say, and we back up our opinions with facts and ideas that are real, we might convince other people that we're right. All right, so here's an example of an opinion piece. To achieve reconciliation, Canada needs to recognize the Métis as a self-governing nation. So this is by Margaret Fro and Audrey Poitres. Contributed to the Globe and Mail, published last week, May the 8th, 2023. So in this case, the author's opinion is right there in the headline. That's what they're trying to argue. That to achieve reconciliation, Canada has to recognize the Métis as a self-governing nation. So basically the argument is if they don't recognize the Métis as an independent nation, as a self-governing nation, that they have not achieved reconciliation. So here's a quick look at how this sentence is laid out, that headline. So to achieve reconciliation, comma, that's an introductory phrase. And then we have an independent clause that reads, Canada needs to recognize the Métis as a self-governing nation. Just wanted to note that we could flip that. So we could put that first part last. So we could say Canada needs to recognize the Métis as a self-governing nation to achieve reconciliation. But I think this is better, the way they phrase it here. Because this is the most important part. To achieve reconciliation, Canada has to do this, right? That's the argument. We'll just have a look at a bit of this article. So, the Métis story is one of resistance and resilience. In recent years, we have been writing a new chapter to our story with Canada based on reconciliation. This spring, we hope to solidify the progress we have made as a people with the introduction and passage of federal recognition legislation by Parliament. So it's written from the perspective of a Métis person, and it starts off very strongly. We talked about hooks, right? The Métis story is one of resistance and resilience. It's a very simple. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just 9 words, but very punchy, grabs your attention, and then she gets right on to it, right? Here's a paragraph in the middle of the article. After years of negotiations, the Métis Nation of Alberta, Métis Nation of Ontario, and Métis Nation Saskatchewan signed self-government recognition and implementation agreements with Canada earlier this year. The agreements immediately recognized that our Métis governments are the Indigenous governments representing our citizens. The agreements also recognize that our Métis governments have lawmaking powers and authority over our citizenship, elections, governance, operations, as well as Métis child and family services. So there are similar things happening in Ontario, and lots of different nations trying to assert their self-government and assert control over their own people and elections and child and healthcare and family services. The last paragraph reads, "We are calling on Parliament to support this important legislation. Once introduced, instead of being known as the forgotten people, we will be recognized as an equal order of government alongside other self-governing First Nations and Inuit. Passage of this legislation will finally end the legacy of ignoring the Métis and denying our rights as Indigenous people. This historic step forward in achieving Reconciliation Canada is long past due." So here's some questions we could ask ourselves about that article. What is the tone of the article? It's very serious. It's talking about a very serious matter. It's serious. It's formal. It's it's political. It's powerful. Who is the intended audience for this opinion article, right? So I would definitely say it's Métis people. It's for government officials to hopefully change their minds, right? How is this article organized and formatted, right? So it's got long paragraphs. So it's always good practice to write about an article like this. So long paragraphs, and I would say it reads kind of like a history book. Very formal. All right, so let's get down to assignment 25, making a prediction, 10 marks, okay? Before you read the next chapter in your novel, skim and scan the pages and write down any 5 words that stand out. Beside the words, indicate why they stand out for you. Point form is okay here. Also, you are to use each word in a new sentence of your own. Note, skimming and scanning is not usually something you would do with a novel. Can you think of a reason why? All right, so we've been talking about the practice of skimming and scanning, and just to refresh your memory, skimming is when we look at a text as a whole. It's when we look at it as a group of we look at its parts, right? Like we look at the titles, we read the headings, we could skim an entire textbook. Like even if it was 500 pages long, we could just flip through it and skim the chapter or the table of contents, or we can just skim a chapter or skim a page, and we're just looking at the big things, the illustrations. We're looking at the pictures. We're looking at the big bolded words. We're not reading. And then scanning is different because scanning is when you're looking for something specific, right? And so I would say that the first time you read a novel, you don't want to be skimming or scanning. You want to just be doing focused reading. And then afterwards, maybe if you're looking for a particular line or something like that, then you might scan for a particular word, or you might skim for a particular phrase, or just looking for a particular chapter in the table of contents. All right. So what you're doing here is you're going to chapter 4. Chapter 4 of our novel, Jimmy Comes Home. And you're going to skim and scan the pages and write down any 5 words that stand out to you. And then also you are to use each word in a new sentence of your own. So I'm just going to flip to well, I'll give a brief recount of what we've done so far, right? So we did read chapter 1 on the airways together. Chapter 1 is Coming Home, where Jimmy comes home. He walks from the airport. He finally gets to his grandma's house, and the last scene is like him sprawled out on his snow machine, and he's thinking about the winter and when he's going to get out there and go for some rides. Chapter 2, we've got Jimmy actually going back to school and having a meeting with his principal. And then finally, getting back to school, he confronts Teresa. That's the mother of his child. So he's back in town, and he's got to confront his past, right? So, and then he spends some time with his grandmother. He spends his time with his granduncle Peter. He's got a lot of respect for Peter, and Peter tells him, "You've got a chance to start again. The people will give you that, right? They're going to give you a chance, right? He just has to make the most of it, right?" And then they make plans to go hunting together. And yeah, so he's got this special bond with Peter. And then, we introduce Gary back in, and we can see how, Gary's kind of a pretty bad influence on Jimmy. And right off the bat, he wants to drag Jimmy back into those past behaviors. Chapter 3 is called Trouble in School. Jimmy goes to school the next day. He gets there late. He's got a teacher named Mrs. Quintel. They've got a pretty rocky relationship at first. Her first name is Louise, so Louise Quintel. She wants Jimmy to do well. She wants Jimmy to succeed. She wants to help him out. But he's not making it difficult, and they do develop a good relationship, I would say. I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but, towards, as the novel progresses. But, right off the bat, for sure, they kind of butt heads, right? Yeah, so he's got a pretty rocky relationship with his teacher. He's got some rough interactions, I'd say, or some hostile interactions with Teresa. He's trying to avoid it. She's trying to avoid him, but she still wants to talk to him, okay? And then, she does have a relationship with Jimmy's grandmother, and then towards the end of the chapter, Jimmy has a meeting, and he's kind of surprised to see Mrs. Quintel show up at his house, and actually no, sorry, he has a really, really rough day at school, and and he's feeling like everybody's out to get him. He's all his plans to get better are kind of unraveling, and you can just see him getting closer and closer to his, getting closer and closer to that, getting back onto that dark path that led him down that road. Okay. So maybe I'll just read a bit of chapter 4, and then we can grab those 5 words. This is great stuff, Jimmy. They're Quaaludes. You'll love them. This is when they're at the cabin. Jimmy and Gary are on to this abandoned trapper's cabin. We get them through one of the guys who lives in Thompson. Once he brought in ecstasy. Whoa. That's the absolute best. We also got some grass if you want it, but we usually leave that or the gas to the end to cool up before we head back. Where are you guys getting the cash for this stuff? Asked Jimmy. The usual. We sell some of it to the other guys, or we get things in Thompson. Not much point in stealing stuff here. The cops came to see us right away. Better to go in here if we're trying to get cash to buy stuff and bring it in. We're getting pretty good at it. He was surprised that they were able to do this. Gary was 19 and Wayne was only 18. It seemed like pretty serious business. Plus, all this stuff is still a lot cheaper in Winnipeg, even Thompson, Gary continued. Especially with our friends we're dealing with here. But there's a big problem when we get off the plane. The RCMP and the band constables are at the airport to search all of our stuff, every time. Why the gas if you still got all this other stuff? Jimmy asked. We still love that old smell and feeling. Didn't you miss it in jail? Now and then, but not much, Jimmy answered honestly as he downed one of the pills. Jimmy and his friends stayed for 3 days, and when they ran out of pills and homebrew, they started on the gas. They picked up the girls on Saturday morning, and Jimmy slept with one of them in the bush. Both were gone on drugs. He was happy, relieved, and glad to be away from people who were controlling his life and telling him what to do. It was Tuesday when they heard the outboard coming across the lake toward them. So that's a key word that I'll write down. So we've got controlling. That word stands out to me. It's the cops. Jimmy thought he was beginning to talk like the white men at Green Star Lake. You better get going, Gary told him. We're used to this, and they're going to catch us anyways. I'm too sick right now to try and outrun them. Make sure you've got no pills on you. All they can find now is the gas. Jimmy could hardly stand, but he pulled his jacket on and staggered into the bush. They'd probably find out he'd been with the others no matter what he did, and that could mean he was going back to detention. In his confused state, the only thing he could do was to run and lose the cops in the bush. So there we go. We got confused. It took him 3 hours to make his way back to the community. His head hurt, and he was very dizzy. Sitting around detention had made him soft, unable to travel through the bush for hours he'd been able to before. When he opened the door to his grandma's house, she was sitting at the table but didn't look at him as he passed to go to his room. Jimmy slept until the next day. His grandma was out of the house when he got up at 11:30. He was waiting for the RCMP to knock on the door. He thought the best thing to do was just to head for school. So he gets to school, and then his teacher comes to ask for his work. You finished that page, Jimmy? Looks like that to me. This work is too easy. Oh, really? Let me see your textbook, she said, and picked out some pages towards the middle of the book. Try this, and that's good work you're doing there. He ignored her. He knew she was just working on him. He'd seen that lots of times before. He was no dummy. Half an hour later, he was called to the office. A band constable and an RCMP officer were waiting for him. They took him to the RCMP building and began to question him. You up at the cabin with Gary and his buddies on the weekend? Yeah, for a couple hours. Jimmy knew it was pointless to lie completely. You dropping pills? Nope, can't. I don't want to go back to juvie. Cut the crap, Jimmy, one of the constables told him. We know that you went up there for more than a couple hours. Jimmy kept silent. They kept questioning him. Here's another word, okay? Maybe I'll just skim and scan just to see how much time we've got left here. Let's see. Uncomfortable. At the end of the chapter, he meets up with Teresa, and they have their first interaction. They've been avoiding each other. He's been trying to avoid Teresa and avoiding talking to her. And then she says, you've got a baby. You think you can just make him go away? He pushed on ahead of Teresa and kept on walking through the back door of the school. He headed for the bush. He didn't stop walking until he was past the point and down at the creek. It was starting to get cold, and he could smell the coming frost. He sat on a rock and put his head in his hands. If he had a rifle, he knew that he might put it to his head and pull the trigger. And after a while, he fell asleep and didn't wake until the moon was up. He remembered the dream he'd had. In it, he'd been holding his dad's hand and walking across a large field of grass. His dad had been laughing, his face full of sun. A large red bird had flown over them and landed in a tree and just watched them. Jimmy couldn't remember any more. He'd had that dream often. He walked home and went to bed. His head was still foggy from the weekend of drinking and drugs. He wondered what had happened to Gary and his friends. So chapter 4, is a pretty dark chapter. It's a pretty low moment in Jimmy's life, and the words that I've chosen kind of like illustrate that. So controlling, confused, questioning, uncomfortable, foggy. It just shows you how messed up Jimmy is inside his mind. He's been through a lot of trauma. And if you're like me, you sympathize with Jimmy. You want his life to get better. You want him to be able to figure out a path forward, okay? But you got to take those 4 words and you've got to write a sentence for each one, right? And then you could like do a theme if you want. They could all be around like a similar theme or a similar idea. Like Jimmy felt others were controlling his life. He was confused about which path to take. Jimmy is questioning if he's welcome or not back in the community, right? So you could do that if you want, like a similar theme, right? So you've also got to indicate why they stood out for you, okay? And then you use each word in a new sentence, okay? So you do actually here. I'll do. So it's a 3-parter, right? So you pick the word, and then you say why you picked it. You can do that in point form, and then you write a sentence with that word. Okay, so why you picked it? It's I picked it because it's how. In point form is okay. Jimmy feels he's being controlled. And then you write a new sentence with that word, okay? So just jot down, why you picked that word, and then just give me a new sentence. Based on the words that stood out for you, as well as on the title of the chapter, make a prediction as to what the main idea of this chapter will be. Your answer will contain at least 3 sentences, okay? So I guess I kind of did some of that for you, but I just feel it's important to kind of summarize the chapter and to give you some things to, to go on. But what you'll do is, you pick those 5 words, why you picked them, write a sentence with them, maybe go to a dictionary and read the definition of that word if you need to, so you understand its full implication, its full meaning, and then write down your sentence, okay? And even if it's all good, like you can make a prediction as to what the main idea of the chapter will be. Sometimes just through the act of skimming and scanning, you may do what I did and just sort of read ahead and have a pretty good idea of what happens in that chapter. It's all good. Just simply say what you think the main idea of this chapter is going to be. Chapter 4, the cabin. Okay, so we are talking about Lesson 6, Assignment 26. This is a series of paragraphs expressing an opinion. 50 marks, okay? So it's a big chunk of your grade in this course. So when we express an opinion in writing or other platforms, our purpose is to convince the reader that we are right. We might entertain or inform them along the way, but our main purpose is to persuade, okay? So So we've talked briefly about, our writing having a purpose. Our writing is trying to achieve something, and then we're usually trying to persuade people that we're right, or we're trying to give them information, or we are entertaining them, okay? So, and this is like your primary purpose, okay? And so with an opinion article, you are giving your reader information, for sure, and you might actually do it in a funny way or like an entertaining way. But really, what you're doing, your number one is you're trying to persuade. Okay, so every piece of writing has a primary purpose in mind. Okay, so your primary purpose is to persuade, right? You're trying to convince them that, hey, I'm right, and here's why. So advertisers will use persuasive writing when they want us to buy something, when they want us to buy a product. A politician uses persuasive writing to try and make us vote for them. And a community activist tries to convince people that what they're fighting for is right and should be supported, right? So these are different ways that you try to persuade people. You try to convince them to do something, or to believe that what you're saying is right, and maybe make you take an action, or maybe just make you think a different way. So there's a general format for an opinion article. You state your opinion. You provide a statement of your opinion. So I believe that, or I think this is true. Or if we look back at today's article of the day, if Canada wants to achieve reconciliation, then they have to recognize the Métis as a self-governing government, right, or a self-governing people that can make all their own decisions, right? So you may agree with that opinion, you may disagree with that opinion, and I think that, and that's kind of the way that politics works. Is an issue is introduced, and some politicians agree with it, and some of them don't, and they try to convince the other side, or and they don't expect everybody to come along their side, but they try to convince enough people to join them on their side, and to try to get this thing passed and voted, right? So you give your statement of your opinion. You provide evidence for why you're right. So you give facts, stats, events, anecdotes, quotes from experts, and then you give some concluding comments. So you restate your opinion and connections. This is where you might offer next steps. Because I'm right on this, we should, right? And then in the article that we looked at today, they were talking about how, in the coming weeks and months, they're going to be kind of talking about that issue in the government of Canada and trying to convince the politicians that these Métis people need to have that recognition. And this follows a similar pattern to some of the other writing assignments that I've talked about with you. You introduce a main idea. So like if your intent is to inform the reader and you try to give them information, then you tell them what you're going to talk about. It's sort of like when you give a speech or when you tell a story. It's like, hey, I'm going to tell the story about going moose hunting with my grandpa. Okay. Then you give evidence, or you give examples, and things your grandpa said and things you guys did and where you went, right? And then you wrap it up. That's kind of the pattern that happens with a lot of writing, right? You introduce a main idea, you expand upon that main idea, you come at it from different angles, you work it a few different ways, you give the reader lots of different perspectives, and use your powers of description, and make your case, and then you wrap it up. So for this assignment, you have to choose between one of the two following statements and keep it in mind. Decide whether you agree with it or not. So there's really 4 different possibilities here, okay? So option 1, men should be forced by law to financially support any children they have. So you can agree with that statement or you can disagree with that statement. Option 2, young people who return from juvenile detention should have to complete community service hours and write a letters of apology for past behavior. So you can agree with that statement. I agree that they should have to do this, or you can disagree with that statement. I don't agree. I disagree that they should have to do this. So step 1, you have to first choose which issue you're going to write about and decide if you agree or disagree with the statement. Then you can rephrase the statement so it shows your opinion and explains why you think it is true or not, depending on your opinion, right? So if we look at that first one, men should be forced by law to financially support children. You know, so this relates to Jimmy, of course, in the novel. He's not a man yet. He's still a young boy, or a teenager at least, but he does have a young son. So men should be forced to let's see. Men should be forced by law to financially support. I forgot the by law part. Should be forced. Should be forced by law to financially support any children they have. Okay. So that's the statement. And then you have to agree with that statement, or you have to disagree with that statement. And then I think in the next class what we'll do is we'll look at the other opinion. We'll look at the other opinion, okay? But today's class, we'll stick with this one, okay? So and so you're going to write down your statement, okay? That's how it's all going to begin, okay? This is your statement. So and then you can use this format. It works very well. I believe that men should or should not. All right? So option 1, option 2. Should not be forced. ... Okay? So, and then, so you got to think, what side of that agreement do you fall on? So it is kind of like an absolute argument, right? Are we talking about all men? Like what if they're in jail? What if they don't have the financial means to support them? What if forcing them to financially support these kids will, put them in hard times? So sometimes even if you disagree with the statement, it's good to look at the counter arguments for it, and sometimes that's known as playing the devil's advocate, and you can do that on your own. You can sort of look at both sides of it and just to see, which one that you disagree with, right? So after you've got your statement, try to brainstorm a list of at least 5 points or reasons for why you are right. You need to be as specific as possible. If you are struggling to come up with reasons for why you are right, you should either rethink your opinion or do some research, right? So if you're having a hard time thinking about why you're right, then you might have to rethink that opinion, restate it. You don't have to just throw it away, but you might need to restate your opinion, and you may need to rethink, or you may need to do some research. You may need to get some more information to kind of make that case, okay? So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we go should not. I think they should, but I'm going to go with should not. So what if we go? Well, yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to think of reasons why they. Well, let's just start there, okay? So if we go with option 2, So reasons they, well, let's keep it clear here. Reasons men should not be forced to financially. Okay, so try to think, of 3 reasons here. We've got the men they may not be working or living in poverty. It could lead them towards crime, or just, it could make them do bad things, right? So that's a good argument. I mean, that's I think I didn't even think of that. It just took me a while to stumble upon that answer, but it is a good argument, though. I think, if you force someone to do something, if you force someone to pay, then they may do bad things, right? They should pay because they want to, not because they're forced. That's not a very powerful argument, but it's an argument nonetheless. And it's expensive, and it ties up the court system. Chasing people down, right? So so maybe, and then sometimes when you write down an article, or when you write down your list, if I think of the reasons why they should be forced to support the children, I think it's going to be a lot easier. I'm going to think, it's going to be better for the kids, it's going to be better for the mom, right? It's going to be better for society if they're contributing that money. And I think really the only argument that I really kind of come back to is just what could happen if you force someone to make these payments. Like if they're already in a rough spot, if they're already in, if they're already living like a rough life, then and they don't have a lot of money, and they're living in poverty, they may take some kind of desperate action They may take some kind of desperate action to make that happen. Okay. But again, if you're arguing on the other one, so after writing down this list, I might go back and change my statement a little bit. I might say, I might say something like, I believe that some men should be forced, right? And then I would have to, I would really have to, I believe that some men, and then I would have to, really explain. So you can change the statement a little bit, right? Really explain what I mean by some, right? And that way, what we do there is we introduce a little bit of nuance. And by nuance, I mean, like, you're fine-tuning the details, right? So it's like, you know, I believe that men should have to financially support the children they have, but maybe only some of them, right? So, or there should be sort of like limitations on it, right? And of course, you got to do some research and you got to figure out, you know, what's happening, right, in the real world. So, review your review your statement of opinion and the list of reasons for why this statement is true. Use this information to guide a free writing session, right? So you can do that. You can just simply start writing, and then maybe in tomorrow's class we'll go into using this paragraph organizer to organize our thoughts, and then you know it's also a good time to do some research, right? So I would try to state an opinion, try to frame it, and then once you've framed it, then you can go and gather some information. And then when you gather your information, you may want to change your argument to something else after you find out what's actually happening in the real world. So that's all the time we have for today. Don't have time to really go back and really explain assignment 24, but I believe if you go back to assignment 24 from yesterday's class and you look at what I talked about, I think I've laid it out there pretty clearly. And as always, reach out to me if you got any questions about these assignments. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on Monday.